Hi, I'm Ryan Burke, and this is Anjali Fernandez. We're going to introduce ourselves, and then we'll talk about the Schmidt Futures APM program, some examples of projects like the one Anjali's working on, and then we will open it up to questions, which we'll be fielding through the chat. So as we're talking, feel free to add questions to the chat, and we can take those at the end. So to start, I'm Ryan. I started the APM program last year at Schmidt Futures. And I also manage a portfolio of our investments focused on using data and machine learning for social good. Before this, I was in the Obama administration for the last term on the White House economic policy team and focused a lot on job training and labor market issues there. Anjali?
Yeah, and hi, I'm Anjali Fernandez. I am a current APM at Schmidt Futures. I graduated from Harvard in 2018. I studied computer science and focused a lot on government and civic technology. So that's definitely a thing that I've been interested in for a very long time and have tried to work on in various aspects. So we're very excited to be here and talking to you about this program. And let's see, how many people do we have in here?
We have 19 people.
Cool.
Okay, so let's get started. First, I'll talk about what is Schmidt Futures. Schmidt Futures was founded a few years ago by Eric Schmidt as he was stepping down as the chairman and CEO of Alphabet and Google. And he really wanted to take and apply lessons he had learned from building a successful technology to how he could help make traction on major challenges in the world using tech. So we structured ourselves as a venture facility for public benefit. That basically means we find people who we think have incredible ideas that if they got to scale could be a big deal on making progress on major challenges that we face. And then we partner with them not only by giving them capital, but really helping them through connections to our network, giving them processes and teaching them how to build new things in the world. And lastly, through helping them to find great talent, which is really where the APM program comes in. So what is the APM program? The reason we started it was really, Eric is kind of obsessed with marketplaces and platforms. And what we saw was that there were two failure points that actually could be solved by one another. So on one side of the marketplace, and I've worked with nonprofits and social organizations both at the White House, but also through my time as a management consultant. And time again, I found that the biggest barrier that they had to both growing and scaling good ideas in education or healthcare, agriculture, you name it, was not capital, but it was actually having the right people to work on those issues. And especially folks that were trying to build products, really struggling in terms of product management, design, and engineering talent. On the other side, and I think you all represent this, there are a lot of young people who really want to use their technology skills to make a difference and feel like they don't know where to land in terms of places where they're going to get great mentorship, have high impact, have a lot of ownership, and have the types of things that they would get at a big tech company, but working for social good. And so the APM program is really meant to close this gap by identifying projects with incredible organizations. We'll talk about some of those, but where we place young people coming right out of school with experience in computer science as kind of product leaders within organizations. And we really believe that even as young people, they can have outsized impact, even relative to more experienced folks, based on what we saw at Google. So for example, in Google's first class of APMs, two 22-year-olds built Maps and Gmail. So we really think this model can work based on what we saw there. So now let's talk about some of the projects. The way the APM program is structured, you'll rotate through a series of projects every 6 to 9 months over the course of the 2 years. Those are all going to be projects that have some common themes. They're all using data or machine learning to solve a societal challenge. We believe that if it worked and got to scale, that would be a big deal for the world. They all have a leader or founder who we think is someone who really represents our values and someone who would be an incredible mentor for an APM. And they're all projects where, as an APM, you will be kind of a central product leader and owner of what you're doing and building something with a launch date. So there's no things that are just research or idea generation. It's all actually building something that will go out there into the world. So I'll share a couple of examples of projects people are working on and then hand over to Anjali to talk about her project. One of the projects is focused on poverty alleviation. The federal government spends about $1 trillion a year on social safety net benefits. So things like food stamps, healthcare, welfare, On average, 35% of poor people who qualify for those benefits based on their income aren't getting access. So last year for food stamps, that was $15 billion left on the table for poor people who needed it. And the reason for that is largely because of outreach. They're not aware that they qualify. And two, even if you do know you qualify, like think about yourself trying to do a DMV application, the processes to sign up for these benefits are super burdensome. So they each have different applications on different websites. They each have different interview processes and document collection, even though the criteria are largely the same. So one of our APMs, Glenn, is going to be working with an organization called Benefits Data Trust. They have solved this problem in a really analog way where they've looked at a state, here's the people who are on healthcare, here's the people who are on food stamps, same eligibility criteria, where are the gaps? And then they send a mailer to those people. They call into the Benefits Data Trust call center, and they screen and sign them up for 19 different benefits in Philadelphia at the same time. What Glenn's going to be doing is translating that kind of work through call centers and mailing into a product that's going to be started in New York City. It's really going to be their front and back end for benefits enrollment for 37 different benefits at the same time. So that's one example. Another example, our APM Rhea is going to be working with an organization called Plant Village out of the UN and professor in Pennsylvania. And the focus there is on smallholder farmers in Africa who, especially in the face of climate change, are seeing massive destructions in their crops and real changes in growing patterns that they have no idea what's happening or how to respond. So Rhea is working with, they have satellite imagery data and an image database of hundreds of thousands of plants from NASA, UN, and others. And she's working on how do you take that data on, crop productivity for a smallholder farmer, feedback on what they should do in terms of watering and fertilizer and what they should grow to be able to increase output. And then ways to get it done and new weather predictions they should be looking for, and put it in an interface that a farmer in Africa could really understand to make better decisions. So those are two examples. I'll turn it over to Anjali to talk about her project.
Yeah, so my project is focused on early childhood education. And so when you think of education, usually you think, well, kindergarten, where a kid joins school. But research has shown that the most important period for brain development happens between the ages of 0 and 3. And that's when 85% of the brain development for a child occurs. And so there's this time period during which language skills are being developed, and there is a critical window where parents are actually have the opportunity to have significant impact on their child's trajectory in life. So scientists have found that depending on the quality and the quantity of the language environment that a child experiences when they're infants and toddlers, that has direct influence on their cognitive development, on the neural pathways that form in their brain, on their success in school, even on their 8th grade math scores. So there's a very clear line between how parents converse with their children at a very, very young age and their success later on in life. And so what I'm working on with a team based out of the University of Chicago is helping build tools that allow researchers to understand what the quality and quantity of a child's early language environment looks like so that they can develop better population level metrics on what is important. And in addition, we're working to use machine learning to help parents feel more empowered about making choices and creating a better language environment for their kids and having better conversations, because that's this critical time period at which that you can totally influence the trajectory of a child's life. And so I think back to what Ryan was saying, the goal of most of our projects is to find these time periods and these windows where a little bit of technical talent in the right place can have an outsized impact.
Great, thanks, Anjali. And I guess the last piece that we'll touch on is the application process and what we're looking for. So applications, we're asking folks to submit them by October 1st. The real goal of those, and there are a number of essay and video questions, is just for us to get to know you better. We're really looking to see whether this program is a good fit from both sides. So just don't stress over them, just be kind of open and honest in those. Some of the things that I think we're really looking for that we found really lead to the success of APMs is, one, people who are highly entrepreneurial. And by that, I really mean people who aren't looking for someone to tell them, here's the answer to a pretty clearly scoped problem, but are willing to jump into something like Anjali was describing that is messy and tricky and people don't know the answer. It hasn't been done before, like many of these problems in spaces like early childhood, and really can prioritize and try building a solution. This next cohort also, just like Anjali, is really building this program. This is only going to be our second year, so we're going to be learning a lot and relying on the APMs to build alongside us. The second is curiosity and desire to learn. So, you guys, again, are going to be throwing into spaces that, you know very little about going in, but you're going to have a ton of experts, both within places like the University of Chicago, but just our broader network who you can draw on. So you almost see yourself as like the conductor of this orchestra to be able to get something done. So the more curious you are, the more you want to kind of talk to people, answer questions, dig in and build that team, I think the more successful you'll be. The third is people who are highly persistent. And my colleague Kumar has even called this people who are obsessives. So where, you can dig into a problem like Anjali with the kind of Fitbit for cognitive development she's building. She's literally sleeping with her device, like the prototype that we have, to figure it out. She's putting it on her dogs, like really people who are going to become really passionate and persistent, and in the face of hard challenges, just keep pushing and being highly creative. The last one I would mention is just we're focused on people who are have low ego. And by that, I mean, we're really looking for people who are focused more on and driven by passion to have an impact on the areas they're working with, greater than just their own personal success. And I think that orientation has led to us being able to build a great team here. So with that, we will turn it over for people to ask questions. Like I said, go ahead and just put questions in the chat and we will respond to them. We'll give folks just a minute to do that.
Yeah, so in the meantime, I think maybe we can go through some questions that we've commonly gotten in the past. One thing that people always ask me is, well, why did you pick this program? And for me, what it always comes back to is the team and the work. And when I was in your shoes, trying to decide what I wanted in a full-time role, the things that were important to me were knowing that, of all the places I could be using my computer science degree and applying the technical skills that I have, where could I be doing something that is making a positive impact in the world that maybe people aren't already doing? So a part of social impact that isn't necessarily incentivized by the market, or isn't going to maybe make me the most money, but is definitely going to do some good. So being able to find that kind of project that is doing something positive in the world, that was key for me. And the second thing was the people, like who was I going to be working with? What kind of mentorship and support would I be having, and what would I be learning? And I think that's something that I found really valuable here at Schmidt Futures, is that the team here is just really incredible. There are people who are experts in almost everything that you could possibly think of. And if you have a question about any subject or any topic, technical or not, either there's someone in this office who knows the answer or knows someone who knows the answer. So there is this massive network of really brilliant people that you have that are so approachable and that you're always in contact with, that I think it's an awesome community, and it's an awesome learning opportunity that's honestly very unparalleled.
Great. I think we got a couple of questions here. I will kind of sort through them in turn. Anjali, do you want to start and give a couple of examples of like what you're doing on a daily basis and who you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. So my day-to-day may not necessarily be the day-to-day of every APM, just because, depending on what the project requires, there may be different skill sets that are necessary. But one thing that I think is pretty consistent is creating, product roadmaps, and being able to understand what is important in something that we're trying to build, and kind of really delivering on that in like an MVP style. So as an example, I'm trying to, at the moment, create this wearable device, and there are a lot of considerations that we're working through when it comes to battery life and storage capacity on this device. And while I am not necessarily a hardware expert, there are a ton of people who are. And so, for example, last week I was scheduling meetings, and convening design sessions with these professors at the University of Chicago and with a bunch of other consulting experts in this space to help understand what the trade-offs are for building this device. So that's one example. Another example of something that I do pretty regularly is some form of user research, because I think that's, a skill that's pretty universal when it comes to all product management roles. Is when you're building something, you need to understand who you're building it for and why you're solving a problem for them. And so in my case, I'm building for parents. And so I am regularly scheduling interviews and going on visits, some on my own, some through the community-based interventions that are occurring at the University of Chicago, really just trying to understand what people need and observing their daily life and figuring out how what we are building could help solve a real problem and not just building something for the sake of building it.
Great. There's another question about how we kind of work with the partners like the University of Chicago and get integrated with the teams. I would say at a high level, one of the main criteria for how we are selecting these projects is organizations and people, again, who we really think will be great to work with APMs and that they can learn from, but also who are going to get an extreme amount of value from working with us. And where the APM is going to play a role where they'll have real ownership. So when we were scoping out Anjali's project, for example, it's with this woman, Dana Suskin. She's a cochlear implant surgeon turned researcher. She does a bit of both and runs an early childhood center she's run for almost 20 years at the University of Chicago. She had an idea for building this and was thinking about hiring a kind of executive director, project manager to run the team. And instead of doing that, we brought in Anjali to serve in that role. And she's totally kicked butt. And Dana is now totally reliant on her. But we're really going to look for spaces where the team wants and needs the help from an APM so that you'll become incredibly valuable to them from day one. Do you want to share anything else about what it's been like to work with that team?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the really cool aspects of this program is that you're not just working with the people that you see in the office every day, you're also working with so many different partners and external organizations. So one thing that really appealed to me was this ability through this program to take these technical concepts and translate them for audiences that aren't necessarily inherently technical. So I'm not always just talking to computer scientists or to software engineers. In fact, more often than not, I'm working with people who are, speech pathologists or child therapists or doctors. And I'm translating what they need and what they are telling me into product requirements that are technical in nature. And so there's this really exciting aspect of taking something that is an idea in one field and translating that and applying your technical skills to build something very tangible. And as far as working with my team specifically, it's just been so awesome. I visit in Chicago fairly regularly. It's like about 30% of the time that I'm traveling. And so it's really great to be part of this other team and see how we all fit together. So it's been fantastic.
Great. We're getting some other questions about kind of how this experience might be different from being a typical PM and also how technical it is. I would say that typically what a PM will be doing is you're going to be working on an existing product. So you'll come in and at Google, you're staffed on AdWords. And then there'll be a pretty clear spec for here's what you are trying to build. You'll work with a designer oftentimes to kind of figure out what the feature is going to look like, or if it's a back-end feature, work with some of the engineers. And then you will manage a Jira board or something to get an engineering team to work on time and on spec to build out that thing. I think the difference on most of these projects is one, kind of the messiness of the space that you're working. So like when Anjali came in, they had a big vision for something they wanted to build, more like a startup environment than a big tech company. And she had to take that from a big idea to really a full-on kind of product scoping document for what they were going to build. And while she'll be doing some things like she's hiring an engineering team, she's going to be managing them, she'll be doing a lot of that. But I think in the context of having more ownership of over the entirety of a project, and again, in a smaller startup-like environment. On some of the projects, it might feel more like a traditional PM role. Another project that we're working on is with a real-time analytics startup called Banjo that's out of Park City. Our APM Kara is working on a data product basically to combat the opioid epidemic that allows social workers and law enforcement who might otherwise be arresting an opioid user to know where's the nearest open bed at a treatment facility and bring them there. So for Kara, Banjo has a pre-existing large engineering team. They have product managers. And so she's kind of sitting as a PM within that existing organization and learning a lot of Banjo's processes. At the same time, I think the unique piece about being the APM is she spent a ton of time with their CEO, with their leadership team, and is kind of giving feedback between them. So I think it gives her more exposure than she would were she just a traditional PM at Banjo. The other question about kind of the balance between this and software engineering and how much you'll do that's technical, I think in this class that's really dependent on the APM. There have been a couple who have come in and said, I really want to get my hands dirty and I want to spend, a third of my time at least doing more software engineering specific stuff. And those folks are, working on projects like we have a project in healthcare trying to build more of a field of computational medicine. And one of our APMs is going to be working with some health systems to use longitudinal outcomes-oriented data to produce research that they can publish alongside them to show health systems the value of their data. So that's going to be a much more hardcore machine learning and data science type project because that's what that APM is interested in. So I think that's another unique thing about this program is because it's so new, a lot of what we're doing is trying to make sure the work, both in terms of the types of sectors you're working in and the functions you're learning are really aligned with what the individual APMs are most excited about. Other questions, we had one question about just kind of the size of the program. Right now we're at about 9 people for this year's class. And next year we're planning on having anywhere between like 10 to 15 APMs. And the class from last year will still be around. Schmidt Futures as a whole is probably with the new APMs about 25 people right now. We have purposely kept ourselves really small so we can, even though we are spending as much money as a lot of foundations at the size of hundreds of people, just so that we can maintain kind of agility and flexibility as we grow, rather than getting mired in kind of bureaucracy quickly. Other questions, there's one here about work-life balance and how people strike that. Anjali, do you want to talk about that for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, that's something that's very important, and that's something that is also reflected in our team culture. There have definitely been days when, I show up and I am, there's a lot to be done, and it is possible that, I could stay and complete my work, but I would be here until the evening. And I have very explicitly been told by some lovely teammates like Mercedes who tell me, it's time to go home, Anjali. Like you need to relax. So there's definitely a strong sense of, you have your work and you also have your life. But at the same time, I think everyone here cares about what they're doing so much that, I'm always thinking about work, and I'm always, even when I'm not in the office, like I'm wearing the device that I'm building and like trying to help make it better. So it's always in the back of my mind. But yeah, we like to have balance here. Yeah.
Awesome. Other questions. There's one question about the stages of the application. So the application is due October 1st. Over the month of October and some into early November, we will be doing first and second round interviews. The first round interview is going to be a combination of behavioral questions, just really trying to get to know you and how you work, what you're passionate about. And then there may be some questions that are more case style. So giving you an example of a project an APM is working on and thinking through it together. And then there will be one interview during that round that is a product analytics interview, kind of typical to what you would expect from Google or a place like that. The last stage in the process, which will happen around either the second or third week of November, will be a round of interviews with our executive team. So our CEO, some of our advisors from Google, that'll really give you a chance to meet the leadership and make sure you're comfortable with them and vice versa. And then we'll be extending offers around the last week of November, maybe going into December for some candidates. If you have an exploding offer before those dates, like before end of November, message the APM apply and let us know, and we will, attempt to accommodate that as much as possible. Other questions, we're just marking these off. Tapia, we are currently planning to go. If you're interested in grabbing coffee or meeting up with us while we're there, I'll be there and my colleague Candace will be there. Unfortunately, Anjali will not be attending. She'll be busy with her project. But just message the APM apply and we can try to set up some time to talk. Grace Hopper, we are currently not planning on attending. We did last year and we'll try to make it next year, but just decided to go to Tapia this year instead. Okay, other quick questions. There's one here about applicants from India and visas. I would say it's on a case-by-case basis, but this year we have several people, both from the APM class or from even in other roles that we have that have visas from other countries. And we've absolutely been able to accommodate that. So if you have a visa issue, I would not let that stop you from applying. But I would flag that somewhere in your application or again to the APM apply email, just so we know and can be thinking through that with you over the course of your process. Let's see, next, how is success measured for APMs and projects? Anjali, do you want to talk about that for yourself and then I'll touch on it at the high level?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in terms of my project, part of my job is to define what success looks like. And so that means creating objectives and key results for quarterly milestones for what we think is a scoped down version of what our product should be and can feasibly be. So in that sense, we have a lot of agency in understanding what requirements are, what is possible, and setting up metrics to define what success looks like. And so that's really different on a case-by-case basis for each project. But I think universally, we're just trying to build and test and iterate as quickly as possible to validate these hypotheses that we're creating about what we think could make a difference.
Yeah, and I think exactly to Anjali's point, the way that we have structured things, really building off stuff that Eric learned at Google, is by at each point that we have in a project, trying to make sure that we are able to make the decision about, does it make sense to move forward and continue to invest more capital and talent to build this? So for projects that are really at the outset, like kind of seed stage, like Anjali, the key there is trying to figure out, okay, what is the kind of minimum viable product we're building based on the biggest feasibility risk? So the project I mentioned in the healthcare space, we're trying to build a data set that has kind of data on patients, their courses of treatment, their outcomes, high dimensional images like MRIs that can be openly accessible to machine learning healthcare researchers. The biggest feasibility risk there is, can we get health systems to give us that kind of data in an open way, which is really hard and really hasn't been done before. And so in that case, over the first 12 months of the project, that's really what we're trying to test. And if they are not able, that team is not able to get that kind of data from health systems in a format that's helpful to researchers, we will probably deprecate that project because that's the core objective that we need from them at that point. For Anjali's objective, one core objective is, can we build an algorithm that effectively tracks conversational turns and back and forth between parents and kids? If we can't meet that objective, we may not be able to continue the project. If we can, then we'll get to the next step. So that's really it's a scaffolding of objectives depending on the work. I would say the main other objective for the project overall is just that the APMs come out with the skills, knowledge, and experiences to be able to go and do stuff in the world according to the passion areas that they've been able to build.
And to that point, I think that even if we set a goal and we don't meet that goal, that's still a learning. And so even in that sense, a failure is still something that we learn from. And it's not like your project didn't succeed, and so now you are not succeeding, because in the end, we're still gaining valuable insights about what is feasible and what is possible and where we should go next.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've gotten some questions about how projects are selected and scoped, and whether APMs are going to be responsible for doing that off the bat. I have found, as someone who started working in like social impact type projects when I was really young, that one of the hardest things to do is find social impact organizations and visionaries to work with that are really going to be the kind of things that can have a lot of impact and are just the sort of structure where you're going to get ownership, you're going to be working with really talented people, and all of those other things are in place. You're going to be building something real and not just writing a research paper, which is what often happens. So me, along with some other folks on our team, are really scoping all of the projects for when the APMs come in. But like Anjali mentioned, a lot of times that may be a person with a goal and you have to dig in and design it from there. But I think, and Anjali can correct me, but that's been worked really well so far, just in making sure the projects are really high quality. We're working with great people, and there's a good leadership role for the APMs.
Yeah, I think in the work that Ryan does in scoping, the goal is to set an APM up for success. So we're not going to throw you into a scenario where you're not going to know what to do. There will be, mentorship around what your goals are, and there will be a structure kind of in place for you to, achieve something. And in the end, the goal is that you, both as a team and as an individual, learn something.
Yeah, and I would say, the way that APMs are being assigned to projects is largely a combination of what their skill sets are and aligned with the needs of the project that they're working on. So like Anjali, for example, had helped to build a digital services organization in Germany and also worked at the White House with some of my colleagues. And so being able to throw her into something that was really big and hairy made sense because she'd done that before. But then also a lot of it is, what passion areas you have and what you're personally excited about working on. And so I would say, for all of the APMs so far, we've really been able to marry those two things pretty effectively. Other questions, Anjali, we got one for you around what are some of the experiences, classes, extracurriculars, et cetera, that have helped you to be successful?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I think that some of my favorite extracurriculars and activities, thinking back to college, there are all sorts of skills that you develop in places that, are not necessarily things that you might end up doing for the rest of your life, but the skills you develop in one arena might definitely apply in another scenario. And so for me, I came into college and one of the first things I did was I joined the mock trial team. And so that was a huge part of my life and a huge part of my college experience. And I think that things that I did that were patently not like technical or CS related really helped me develop, a confidence and public speaking and just general, comfort with ambiguity and thinking on the fly that really helped in all aspects of whether it's internships in tech companies or working in government, or definitely in the projects that I'm working on now at Schmidt Futures. So there are definitely, extracurriculars that I've done that are totally not related to what I do now, but have helped me develop skills and communities that are incredibly helpful and, fulfilling for me. Yeah.
Great. And Anjali, tell us about what mentorship opportunities that you've had.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of different ways to think about mentorship. There's like the formal kind and the informal kind. And I think we do both of those pretty well. So as one example, I have Ryan. And Ryan is just a fantastic person who has a ton of really great experience in so many different industries. And so working with her to help define what my project is and make sure that it's something that's aligned with my interests and the skill sets that I already have, and also mapping to a need that exists in a particular space like education that I care about. That whole process has been really fantastic, and it's helped me, scope out my work and figure out how the things that I'm doing now can align to help set me up for success in the future. So that's like a very tangible day-to-day type mentorship that I get from the people that I work with very directly. On another level, there are people who are part of our organization, like our CEO and our chief innovation officers, that I have regular conversations with, and it's very much a resource that's just provided to you. These people who are like experts in their field and have done so much, and are incredibly approachable, willing to help in almost any scenario that you may provide, willing to like bounce ideas off of you and have you bounce ideas off of them. So there's this structure there as well. There are also a lot of people in this organization and in the broader Schmidt Futures network who have experience doing a bunch of different types of activities. So maybe there are people who are really, really experienced product managers who can help me, for example, create the kind of structure and road mapping and, templates for documents that I need to get my project going. There are people who are experts in data science who can help me think through problems that come up during my project, or who can help me workshop ideas that I might have. So there are these other people who are just around and very, very available to help me think through problems that I may be having in work, or thinking about opportunities that may exist where I could use my skills.
Yeah, and I think the way we've designed this, what I've found is having kind of formal trainings that are separate from what you're doing can be helpful, but the level of help that it provides you is somewhat limited. And so a lot of the way that we are helping, Anjali and others develop and grow is by when you have a specific issue on your project, being able to find the right person at the right time to be able to help. So as an example, Anjali has really been thinking through user research and design for both the parent users of her application, but also for the researchers. And there I was able to pull in a designer from the US Digital Services, the Obama team that built healthcare.gov, who's highly capable and going to be able to plug in for Anjali in that way. So a lot of it is going to be back and forth like that, where I see my role and our role more broadly as in bringing in the right mentors and people to support Anjali and others. But it's also on the APM to really have that prioritization and scoping to be able to say, hey, here's how where I need help. And that's definitely a key attribute that we're looking for. Okay, so I think I have gotten to all of your questions. If I didn't get to your question, maybe just resend it. I'm just gonna go through the live chat now, and Anjali, you can look along with me and see if we missed anything. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. If you have follow-up questions, if you want to see us at Tapia, please email the APM Apply email, which we're all checking regularly. And we really hope all of you apply. The last thing that I would say is we're looking for a mix of people in the class. So there are some people like this guy, Sam, who are super deep in machine learning. He's like taught himself all of these crazy algorithms and, could have gone and worked for a place like DeepMind probably. There are other people on our team, like Kara, who majored in, electrical or chemical engineering, and took some CS classes on the side. And she's not going to be the one who's going to dive in and build an ML algorithm, but she brings so many other leadership and amazing qualities to the team. So I would say if you look at our requirements and you think, oh, I only think I meet like 60% of these, please apply anyways. And let us do that sorting because it's all about the cohort and getting a mix of people. So as long as you're open to learning and growing from others in the class and us, we encourage you to do that.
Yeah, and a question that I've gotten a lot is, do I have to have this GPA, or do I have to have gone to this school, or do I have to have majored in this? And the answer to all of those is no. We will take anyone as long as you can express these traits that Ryan talked about. So don't feel like you will be automatically dinged just because you don't have a CS degree, or because you have a 3.4 GPA
or lower, or just
honestly,
whatever it is. Let us think that through.
So like a real person will read your application and watch your videos. There's no like algorithm that just filters people out.
Great point. Great. Well, thank you guys. And we'll be signing off now.
Yeah.